so many of you. My name is Erin McKeown, and I am the CD Project Officer at Ulster Wildlife. I'm just going to take a second to ask if everybody's happy enough to mute themselves for the moment. I might be feeding back badly on some mics, but that seems to have cleared up there. Perfect. Yes, so as I was saying, I am the CD Project Officer at Ulster Wildlife. For those of you who don't know, CD is Ulster Wildlife's shark, skate and ray conservation project. And that is, surprisingly, what we're going to focus on this evening. So we're going to take a deep dive into the world of sharks. I'm going to touch a little bit on their biology, so what makes a shark, and then some shark biodiversity, so our local shark species. And then we'll round off with a little bit on why sharks are so important, why we need them in our seas, but also how they're threatened and what we're doing to conserve them. So before we kick off, just a few housekeeping rules. So this talk should be about 30 to 40 minutes. We've got a lot to cover, so I'll try to just fire on through. And if you're happy enough just to keep any questions then to the end and we can answer them then, but feel free to filter questions into the chat as I'm talking. So your questions up there and we can come to them. This talk is also being recorded and it's going to be shared with you all who registered and Ulster Wildlife members at a later date. So if you don't want to be part of the recording, just switch your videos off and that'll just keep you anonymous. Everyone to be muted during the talk, that's great. I think we've done that. And yeah, do feel free to ask questions, please do. It's always great to hear your thoughts as well. But just fire them into the chat for now. And I hope you enjoy the talk. What we're going to start off by doing is I'm actually going to ask you all just to fire into the chat the first thing that pops into your head when I say the word shark, when you hear the word shark. So work away, fill up the chat, and at the end, we'll come back to some of those first words. I'll ask you again and we'll see if your opinions have changed or if you've learned anything from those as well. So please fill the chat on up. See some coming in already. See, got scary, thought they were fish. Great white, get out of the water is a good one. Wild and free, top predators, amazing, fantastic. Okay, so keep filtering those on through as we go. But then, yes, first we will talk about what actually makes a shark and how they are different from other fish like your bony fish or your marine mammals. So sharks are in fact fish, but when we talk about sharks and when I say the word shark, I'm really covering a closely related group of animals. That's sharks, skates and rays, otherwise known as elasmobranchs. Oh, 1 second, my PowerPoint doesn't want to let me move on. Second, I'll just stop the share and try that again. See if that works. Oh, that might be us working now. Sometimes it takes a second. So hopefully you can see there, that's the word elasmobranchs. So that is what I mean when I say sharks, skates and rays. Now this group of elasmobranchs, they do have certain characteristics that makes them slightly different from our bony fish. And we're going to cover a few of them now. So before we get started, I'm going to take a slight poll. What you're looking at here is a skate skeleton, but I'm going to ask you, I'll share our first poll, what you think a shark and skate skeleton is actually made from. So hopefully that's been launched and you'll be able to see it, and I'll give people a few minutes just to pop their questions in. But what do you think shark skeleton is made of?
316. Good evening, everyone. It's Jack Watson. Yes,
Oh,
Jack.
sorry guys, just happy to mute your mics. I think someone's unmuted there.
When did you get that? When did you get your...
Perfect, thank you. Okay, coming in, we have, yeah, pretty much everybody's got it spot on. So that is cartilage is what a shark and skate skeleton is made of. So well done. I think that's pretty much everybody's come in on that. Share those results there so you can see it. So perfect. Yep, well done. So a shark's entire skeleton is made up of that material called cartilage. So this is the exact same material that makes up the tip of your nose. So if you give that a wiggle, or if you have a feel of your ears as well. And it's that really flexible material. And if as a shark's entire skeleton is made up of this material, it means they're able to make those really sharp, quick turns in the water. This material is also a lot lighter than more heavier bone, so it helps them stay nice and buoyant in the water column too. It's also a lot more durable, so if you think of your bones, if you break them, they take a long time to heal. That's not the same with cartilage. It heals a lot quicker. So this material gives our sharks and our skates a big advantage when they're in the water. Sorry guys, the PowerPoint is just deciding to play up and be a bit slower. Apologies for this. Let me just try it again and come in and hopefully. Sorry, bear with me 1 second, guys, and I'll just see if it's got a little bit of lag time like previously. Share screen. Okay, perfect. Hopefully that'll just keep clicking through for us now. So the second difference is their skin. So bony fish skin is made up of loads of rather delicate scales. So if you think of your goldfish, for example, not as protective. However, if you ever get a chance to feel a shark skin, perhaps in a touch tank at an aquarium, you'll notice it feels quite rough, almost like sandpaper. And that is because shark skin is actually made up of loads of tiny little armored plates that we call dermal denticles. This image here actually shows a very high resolution shark skin. And you can maybe see that each plate has these little tiny grooves, almost like 2 grooves down the middle. And the shape of this actually prevents hydrodynamic drag. So it helps sharks speed through the water really, really quickly. In fact, a few years ago, a national swimming team designed bathing wear or swimwear to mimic the shape of shark skin. And they were denied entry using that swimwear into the Olympic Games because it just gave them too much of an advantage. So sharks are really on the ball that way. The third difference is sharks' ability to stay buoyant in the water. Now this image doesn't show it quite well, but the main way they do that is using their liver. So sharks have really large oily livers, and as oil floats in water, it helps these species stay really buoyant. Now bony fish, so the likes of your mackerel or cod, they don't have this adaptation. They have a very specific organ called a swim bladder. A swim bladder really acts basically like a balloon, so it fills up with air, and then that brings the species up the water column, and then they can let that air out again and it will fall down the water column. However, with that air bladder, you can't make those moves very quickly because of the pressure. If a bony fish was to go up and down the water column too quickly, that swim bladder actually is at risk of exploding. So not the best advantage for fast movement, whereas sharks having that oily liver allows them to make those quicker moves without having to think about their swim bladder, so a major advantage. They also have, which you can probably see better in this image, these really large pectoral fins. So that's the fins either side of them. And this you see quite a lot, especially in sharks like this blue shark, which lives way out in the open ocean. These fins basically give them a little bit of lift, aerodynamic lift, similar to like airplane wings as well. Sharks also have quite a lot, or they have six senses. So they have many of the same senses that we do. So they have their sight, their smell, hearing. They also have touch, except they tend to use those teeth to touch. But they have an extra unique sense as well. So we call this sense, and it's got quite a fancy name, their ampullae of Lorenzini. So if you have a look here at this poor beagle and around their snout, you might be able to make out all those little tiny black dots where the arrow is pointing. And these are what we call their ampullae of Lorenzini. And they're basically a series of jelly-filled pores on a shark's snout, and it enables them to detect electrical signals in the water. Now, they use this really for two things. So firstly, to detect the Earth's magnetic field, so they can actually sense or locate themselves in the water and make these really long migrations without becoming lost. And secondly, they use it to detect muscle contractions of their prey. So for example, how a certain smaller fish is maybe swimming, or how it's beating its tail, or even the beats of its heart as well. And that helps them when they're hunting. So what's really, really cool is they can even differentiate if one fish has a slower heartbeat or has a bit of a muscle contraction, which means that they're maybe older or they're injured. And then that shark knows, okay, that fish is going to be easier prey for me. I'm going to use less energy to go after it. So that's the one I'm going to select to feed on or to hunt as well. So really, really clever adaptation. So a lot of information that I've touched on so far, and a lot of the species that we've seen have actually been sharks. But we also have our skates and our rays. Now, if you look at these two images, you'll see that they look really, really similar. Skates and rays, I think of them almost as flattened sharks. So they look a bit squashed down, and they've kind of got those extended triangular pectoral fins on either side. And that's because they're really adapted to their environment. So like your sharks, they've got that cartilage skeleton, that dermal denticle is their skin, but also that sixth sense, that ampullae of Lorenzini. But they're flattened because they tend to live on the seabed instead. They are usually quite camouflaged as well. See, look at these photos, they're browner, they blend really well in with the rocky seabed or sandy environment. And that helps them to then ambush their prey. So they'll sneak up on prey and then strike really, really quickly. But what's the actual difference then between your skates and your rays? What makes them two different species? So in Northern Ireland, we have quite a lot of skate species in our local waters and not so many rays. What makes this more confusing is that in Northern Irish waters, a lot of our skate species are actually referred to as rays. So we are going to look at some of these species, but we have thornback rays here, cuckoo rays, ungulate rays, but they're actually all skates. So I know that's confusing, but it really is because most of these were named prior to a little bit of deeper genetic analysis. So they were named on appearance, looking very like rays, but when you break it down and look at their official biology, they're skates. So what are some of those biological differences? Well, they have the physical differences. You can probably tell that skates have a slightly chunkier and thicker tail, with some dorsal fins that have kind of migrated down to the bottom of the tail, whereas your rays have almost like a whip-like, very thin tail with a spiky barb on them. But the biggest difference, and one that you can't tell from the images, is how they reproduce. And this is something we're going to touch on a good bit later. But skates lay eggs, whereas rays are what we call viviparous. They give birth to live young. So that's a quick little summary of your skates and your rays. Now, before we go on, I'm going to launch another poll. I might ask Kate to launch it just so I don't touch my screen and something goes wrong with it again, or the PowerPoint freezes. But I'm going to ask you, how many sharks do you think we can get in total in Northern Irish waters? How many do you think we see? 60 plus, got some 30s as well coming through, 40s, give it a little moment. Oh, 30 is leading. Okay, we've got a few more people want to participate. It's back and forth. Okay, I think that's cool. I think we can end it there, Kate. We can see pretty much that we have, most people thinking that we've got 30 species of sharks that have ever been recorded in Northern Irish waters. In fact, we're thinking it's probably more around the 40. So that one in the middle. So we definitely have a lot of really amazing shark species here in Northern Irish waters, which is incredible. Let me see if we can just X out of that onto this. Right, so in Northern Ireland, we have specifically about 20 species that we call resident, so live here all year round. But then we have another 20 species that visit our waters and migrate here during different times of the year, mostly in the warmer months. Now, when people think of Northern Ireland, shark, skates and rays aren't often the first thing that pops into their mind. However, our seas are, as you can see, home to a huge diversity of these elasmobranchs. And not only do we find them here, but Northern Ireland is quite a fundamental location for some of these species, who will come here specifically to use very critical habitats that they require to have pups or to forage for food. So not only do we have them here, but Northern Ireland's really important to them. You'll also find different types of sharks in every habitat here. So you'll get some on the surface of the water, some will live way out in the open ocean, more pelagic species, and then some will occupy deep down in the depths and some more coastal, shallower areas as well. But let's jump straight on into what we've got. So the first one, maybe one of our most iconic shark species, is the basking shark. So this is quite a well-known species. It's the largest fish species that we would get in our waters and the second largest in the world, right after the whale shark. The basking shark can reach lengths of about 12 meters. So if you envision just a city bus going through Belfast City, for example, that's about the average length you're thinking a basking shark would get to. So they're pretty massive. And that big mouth at the front there can get to about 1 meter in diameter as well when fully open. So they may be the largest shark in our waters, but they feed on the smallest organisms found in the ocean. So they like to feed on phytoplankton. So basically these little microscopic animals that you'll find floating in our waters. That's why basking sharks will often be found at the surface of the water. So phytoplankton, like a lot of our plant species, photosynthesizes, so it uses the sun's energy. So they will be found usually in the warmer months when the sun's at its peak along the surface of the water, and that's where you'll find the basking sharks then, hence their name basking as well. And they'll use these gill rakers. You can kind of see them in the image inside their mouth, which is kind of a modified organ, which allows them to filter water and filter out the plankton so they can consume it. They're often referred to as gentle giants. So these guys really aren't very aggressive in the water. As I said, they arrive here in the summer months. Between May to September is quite a good time to see them. And I know people will tell you off Portrush or near the coastal zone there, if you're looking out on a really clear day, you might see a fin sticking out of the water. That could be a basking shark coming through as well. They tend to migrate up the west coast of Ireland, along the top of Northern Ireland, and then up over into Scotland. That is the journey they make. I do have a video here, which hopefully works okay. It's maybe not the clearest. You can try to have a look, but you'll see that's a big basking shark coming through there, moving through the water, and you can kind of get an appreciation for their size. Hopefully that's playing okay for you. Okay, so that's a basking shark. But if we move a little deeper And farther from the coast, sometimes you'll come across what we call a porbeagle shark. Now, porbeagles are actually cousins of the great white shark. They're from the same family. And when you look at them, they do actually look quite similar. They're almost like little mini great whites. They're still quite big. They can get to a maximum about 3 meters in length, although most of the ones you'll find around our waters, about 1.5 meters, 2 meters. Sometimes you'll see reports or headlines saying great white shark spotted off the coast, or great white shark, you know, visiting our waters in the summer. We've never had an actual verified recording of a great white shark. In most cases, they tend just to be larger porbeagles. These species are also highly migratory animals, and there was evidence actually of one individual porbeagle who was tagged off the west coast of Ireland, and that same individual was recaptured 10 years later off the coast of Canada. So they're making these massive journeys across the Atlantic Ocean, so they do quite a bit of traveling as well. Next shark we have is the spur dog. This might be one of my favorite shark species. These guys are found both out in the open ocean, but also more near the seabed, like you can see in this image, and they kind of move throughout different habitats. They're also referred to sometimes as spiny dogfish, and you might be able to see just behind their dorsal fin, you've kind of got really big spike or spur. And that's where they get their name from. And this spur is actually used for defense as it contains venom. So what these guys will do is they'll roll themselves up into a really tight little ball, almost like a hedgehog would, for protection with that spur just pointing out. They tend to travel in really large groups, with specifically females staying together. But for me, one of the most interesting things about spur dogs is that they have the longest pregnancy of all vertebrate species. So a female will carry pups for about 2 years before they give birth. So that's quite a long time. They are considered endangered as species. So a combination of what we call life history characteristics has kind of hindered this guy when it comes to really repopulating in the oceans. So it takes about 15 years for a spur dog to reach the age where it's ready to reproduce. Then, as we mentioned, that's another 2 years when they're pregnant before they have pups. And then when they do have pups, the litter is quite small. So it's about 2 or 3 youngsters. So for this spur dog, they have to basically wait 16 years for them to have young. And then they're not even having large litters when that happens. That just means it takes a really, really long time for this species, if the population is really low, if historically they were overfished, for them to bounce back and get to a really healthy size again. So we do have a lovely video of spur dogs here that you'll get to see them a bit closer. I'll just mute that as well because that can be quite loud. And you'll see them here. You're going to notice that they also have a feature that you don't see on all shark species, but you'll see on a lot of skates and rays. And that's what we call their spiracle, which is kind of that hole that's just behind their eye there. You can get an idea. They're not the largest shark species, about 1 meter long sometimes. But that spiracle that's behind their eye is basically a secondary respiratory organ. And these guys like to make really quick bursts through the water, so they need a good bit more oxygen. And that will help them get a little bit more to the brain, so they have a little bit more energy quicker. So if we stay at the surface, you could meet the thresher shark. So a thresher shark's most distinguishing feature, which you can probably see from this image, is their really long upper caudal fin or upper tail fin. And sometimes they can actually get as long as the entire shark's body. And they use this to hunt prey. So they'll find a school of fish. They'll circle that school of fish, swimming really quickly. And then they'll get to such a speed that they'll whip their tail. And it has been recorded that the tip of the thresher shark's tail has moved at such a pace that it's reached boiling point. And they will use that whip to basically stun their prey. So they'll all be stunned, they'll all be still, and then the thresher shark will move around and take as much prey as at once while they're kind of stuck in the ocean or stuck in the water that way. So a really, really incredible species. And you'll be able to see we actually had a thresher shark, excitingly, last summer photographed of rattlin breaching out of the water. So you can see that here. That's when they basically just take massive leaps out of the water. Some other shark species like to do this too. Basking sharks are fans of this. And we don't really know why. There's quite a few theories as to why shark species would like to do this. They might just be having a good bit of fun and enjoying themselves as well. But it's very, very cool to see. It's amazing to see. Okay, so now we are heading to some of the deepest areas around our coasts, and that's where you might bump into one of these guys. So this guy is called the goblin shark. So the exact distribution or where you'd find this species is quite patchy, but there are records of them in Irish waters. So it is a species that I think there's records off the northern coast of Rathlin. We have some really deep water there, and so it has been recorded in our waters. One of the most distinguishing characteristics of this species is their very long, pointed snout. So this snout is actually an adaptation for them living in the deep sea. So these deep, dark waters, you obviously are going to find it harder to find food, to find prey. So these snouts allow this species to have a whole lot more of those ampullae of Lorenzini that we were talking about earlier, those little electrical pulses or jelly-filled pulses. So that helps them detect prey easier in the dark. It helps them find a mate as well, and just helps them navigate that much more hostile environment too. They also have a really interesting feature called slingshot feeding. So I'll play this little clip and hopefully you'll be able to see that. So that is when their lower jaw, I'll go back and see if I can watch that again, actually dislocates, comes out a little bit further and lets them get their prey that way too. So sometimes people don't find the goblin shark their favorite shark, but I think they're pretty cool. So moving on to our coastlines, more on our seabed, or more coastal shallow waters, you are going to get some very different looking fish from out at sea. For example, you might get the small spotted cat shark, sometimes known as dogfish as well. So this species is the most common species of shark that we would have in our waters. And it comes from the largest and most diverse family of shark species, so the cat sharks. So the small spotted cat shark is classified as least concern on the IUCN Red List, which is basically a list that categorizes all known species and analyzes how well they're doing, population size, and gives them a category from least concern all the way down to extinct in the wild. This guy, least concern, means that they're pretty healthy, they're pretty abundant, and their populations aren't really declining at too fast a rate. However, we do know there's some spots around our coast where we used to get these guys and they're no longer being seen in large numbers at all. So we have seen declines. Strangford Lough is one of those sites. So that is why we still want to record evidence of these species, monitor them into the future, so we're able to detect any fast declines in populations at all and try to mitigate what's causing that. This is also with cat sharks. They're a species that is segregated by sex. So females tend to be found together in groups that are quite suitable for egg laying. So a little bit closer into the shore, areas with really dense vegetation, loads of seaweed, seagrass. And for females, a very large portion of their energy goes into reproducing and egg production. So they also don't want to waste a lot of energy on longer journeys. Whereas the males tend to travel a bit more as they don't have to invest as much time and energy into that food and spawning habitat. So we have a nice video which was recorded by Libby Keatley, who is a volunteer diver with Sea Search here in Northern Ireland. So this is a local cat shark species. Just mute that as well so you can see. So you can see for the most part, these guys have a brown spotted pattern. And that helps them camouflage really well in their surroundings. So if you can imagine if these guys were out in the open ocean, and they were kind of, they would maybe have more of a bluer color to them to help them camouflage. Whereas if these guys were blue here, they would stick out a lot more. They also have quite a flattened head and flattened body. I'll play it again. And this again is because they've adapted to hide and fit into kind of more rocky crevices around our shallow coastal areas. They're really lovely, we guys. They are our most common shark species, but so sometimes get overlooked, but I still think they're pretty cool. So we'll move on then, and we'll start to look at some of our skate species. So if you stay on the seabed, that's where you're going to find most of our skate species, because they're more associated with rocky, muddier sites opposed to being out in the open ocean. Some very well camouflaged. So this is a thornback ray. So this would be one of our more common skate species, and you can maybe get an idea of where they actually get their name from. So this video shows quite well where they get their name from. You'll be able to see all along their back and along their pectoral wings, they have these really large, massive bucklers or thorns. Now, you can see them quite prominently there. They're really large. A lot of skates and rays will have these, but the thornback ray, given its name, seems to have them a lot more than most species. You can also see how they're kind of covered in sand. They really will bury themselves into that sandy sediment and then use that as a form of camouflage as well. So they would not be very well detected on that seabed. So incredibly well adapted to their own environment. You can see all those thorns on their tail there too, a little bit thicker than the ray's tail. And then the final species we're going to touch on is the flapper skate. So the flapper skate, also referred to sometimes as the common skate, which is quite ironic because this skate is not common at all, but instead it is actually critically endangered. So it's a very vulnerable species. After being critically endangered, the next stop would be extinct in the wild. It was a very well-known species in our waters in the 60s and 70s. So people would travel from all over Europe. We found old brochures actually that would kind of advertise coming to Strangford Lough to go fishing for the flapper skate. And that's because it was a very popular skate to fish for because of its size. So it's actually the largest skate in the world. So catching one was quite an impressive thing to do. On average, they can get to about 3 meters from the tip of their snout all the way to the end of their tail, and they can have about a 2-meter wingspan. So they really are giants in the sea. In Scotland, some of the anglers, the nickname they would have for them is actually barn doors, because that's what they look like. They resemble when they're on the seabed or on the seafloor. So really, really massive animals. Unfortunately, this is a species that has suffered historically. I'll actually play this little video first so you can see. I'll put a mute on that. So you can get an appreciation of the size of them from this. So this was actually taken from a dive in Scotland where the flapper skate is doing quite well, or there's more abundant in that area. And this is a stationary female on the seabed. And you'll see in a moment a male will come over. I think the divers have maybe got a little bit too close, and the male just wants to come over and mark his territory. And you'll get an appreciation at the end for the size against the diver. So you'll see in a moment. And unfortunately, this is a species historically that was made commercially extinct by fishing. So it was no longer viable to have a fishery for this species, and it's the first ever shark or skate species for that actually to be the situation for. So you can kind of see the size there compared to the diver. At Sea Deep, we really, really love the flapper skate, and we think it's a real shame that they're not as popular or well loved as they could be. You know, we have the largest skate species in the world here in our oceans. That video again. And we think they need a good bit more appreciation, or to kind of spread awareness about that. We kind of think of it like everybody really loves the manta rays, which are incredible species but found in more tropical waters, and the flapper skate is really our equivalent. It's kind of the manta ray of the North Atlantic. But as I said, unfortunately, it's critically endangered. This species is now protected by the Northern Ireland Wildlife Order. So this is a piece of legislation that prevents the flapper skate from being targeted in any way. So it's highly illegal to approach these species. You can't even take photographs of them or dive with them without a proper license. So they have quite a good bit of protection surrounding individuals at the moment in our seas. So what we don't want to happen to the flapper skate is what happened to other shark species like the angel shark in our waters. So this is an image of the angel shark, and they are an incredibly prehistoric looking species, which is kind of just a reminder of how old sharks are. Sharks predate dinosaurs, sometimes people forget about, and they've survived so much, so it's quite devastating that we've got species now that are really on the brink. There hasn't been a recording of the angel shark in Northern Ireland waters for about 20 years. So this is a species that we do think is extinct here locally, and that's not what we want to happen to other species like the flapper skate. However, there is a bit of hope. So in Wales, they have a really amazing project similar to Sea Deep called the Angel Shark Project, and they're working really, really hard to protect dwindling populations that they have remaining. And actually last summer, for the first time ever, a diver working for the project was able to film a juvenile or a young angel shark in the Irish Sea. So that's the first ever footage of that, and that means that they are breeding still, and they do have young that are present in the populations there. So that's really, really exciting. And it's things like this, which is why Sea Deep is working to conserve these species as much as possible, because we know it is possible to do when you put the work in. Unfortunately, though, declines are a trend globally for shark species. So we've got 70% have declined globally since 1950. And most of our local species, some that we've touched on, are not doing too well. We know that shark attacks are something that happens, and unfortunately there's about 12 incidences of shark attacks each year, which is really, really sad. But when you put that into the perspective of how many people kill sharks, it's actually estimated to be about 11,500 sharks are killed an hour by human-based activities. So really, sharks are a little bit more threatened by us than they are to us. So that's always something to bear in mind. So why is it the case that we have sharks and skates declining? So we did touch on this slightly, but they have been historically overfished. So these are two photos taken from Strangford Lough, where, as I mentioned, people would have come to catch the flapper skate, which you can see here on this photo to the left, and loads of other shark species as well. So they were overfished at the time, and for many species, they would have been just overfished to a point where they haven't been able to bounce back. Like the spur dog, they have those slow history characteristics, so they're not able to reproduce as quickly as, say, bony fish, which can spawn and release loads and loads and loads of eggs at once. So for that reason, yes, we think sharks really are some of the most vulnerable animals in our seas, and they have those long lifespans, late to mature, long pregnancies, but they also have some other characteristics. They have resting years. So once they have young, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to reproduce every year from that point on. So again, that's something that's not guaranteed. They also use more inshore areas, so shallower, secluded, safer sites to nurse their young and to have their babies and to allow them to grow in those areas. Now, historically, these sites would have been much more sheltered, secure and secluded. But unfortunately, in recent years, these are the areas that we're actually seeing a lot more activity and are becoming a lot busier, whether it be construction for harbours, a lot more dredging, a lot more fishing in these areas, tourism. So areas that once were kind of safe havens for sharks to have their young and for when sharks are their most vulnerable to develop, we're unfortunately losing at quite a rapid pace. They also have a characteristic called site fidelity. So Site fidelity, not every species displays this when we talk about sharks and skates, but some do. Essentially means that they have a home site. So whereas some sharks will be migrators, like your poor beagle that made that really massive distance across the Atlantic, other species like the flapper skate, we know that it will stay in one location and not move too far outside it for most of its life. Kind of likes to locate or come back to one certain area. Now that's great in some ways. If we know where that site is, we as conservationists can then work to put some protection in place around it and keep that area safe. However, on the flip side, it also means that if someone wants to target a species, or if we have a lot of pollution or development or any other threats to these species happening and it's confined to that one area, you could lose a really large proportion of the population at once, which is really, really unfortunate. So all these things add up to make them what we would call the most vulnerable animals in our seas. But why should we care? Why do we want to protect sharks? Why does it matter to us? So we want to keep a healthy shark population so that our marine ecosystems and food webs stay in balance. We rely on these food systems for our own health on land, for food, for jobs, particularly coastal ecosystems. And sharks, skates and rays are what we call apex predators. So they sit at the very, very top of these chains. That means that they keep in balance everything that is below. If we were to lose our larger shark species, we would have a sudden influx, a real boom of those middle predators. So like your mackerel, your tunas would really, really boom. And they would then eat too many of our base of our food webs there. So our phytoplankton, our zooplankton. And if we lose that base, or if we lose that lower area, that really could just lead to a complete collapse in some of our marine food webs and a real devastating impact on our ocean, and could even lead to some species extinctions. So sharks really are almost like guardians of the sea, and they want to keep on top of everything. So it's really important that we've got healthy populations out there. And that's where we come into it at Sea Deep. So when it comes to sharks, skates and rays, Northern Ireland is particularly data poor. So we don't know a lot about them. So we want to be able to know where they are, where they're moving, so we can protect them. And that's what Sea Deep is trying to do. So Sea Deep was established in 2018, so a few years ago now, with the aim of gathering as much data as possible on our local shark species to provide evidence for what we need to do to help them in our oceans. So how do we get that evidence? So firstly, we have our tag and release program. So Sea Deep project offers free tagging training sessions and free equipment to local anglers around Northern Ireland, and we train them up in best practice catch, tag and release techniques. So they're able to go out to sea, they've got all the resources we don't have, and they're able to catch these species. They'll pop a little tag on them, which is a Sea Deep specific tag, which has an individual number depending on the species, and then they'll release that species back into the ocean. That then initially gives us an idea of what species we have here, because they're always out of sight and out of mind when they're under the ocean. We don't really know what we have. It gives us an idea of whereabouts these species are and other things like what time of year they're present in our oceans. What it'll also help us do is later down the line, if another person recaptures one of these species, they'll be able to look at the tag, look at the number and the information, get in touch with us at Ulster Wildlife and at Sea Deep, and let us know where that species was found and how much later it was found. So we can then go back to our data, look and say, okay, an individual has moved around the coastline, or an individual that was tagged in this location was found at this exact same spot many years later, and helps us build a picture and an image of how these incredible species are using our coast. So our anglers really, really help us do that. We wouldn't be able to do it without them, and they're incredibly passionate and they really love these species. So they're really helping us build that picture. We really appreciate the work they do. This is, for example, one of the flapper skates, and you can kind of see it getting tagged there as well. on the boat. The other thing that we do is egg case surveys. So along our shores, you will find washed up shark and skate egg cases, sometimes more commonly referred to as mermaid purses. When you find these on the beach, and you've probably found quite a few yourself, we ask you to record them with us, because what they do is help us indicate the presence of egg-laying species in our waters and give us more of an insight into potential shark and skate nursery grounds offshore. So far we have, that says about 2,000 egg case records, but I would say we're over 3,000 now. So we've got a really good data on these. We've actually been able to find, again, that says 3, but just last week we found our 4th ever flapper skate egg case for the project, which is really, really exciting, because that helps us kind of give an indication that we know that this incredibly critically endangered species is laying eggs maybe in our coastal waters or not far offshore. And we also find some really rare finds, and kind of helps plug some gaps and works alongside our tagging data to just give us a better understanding of these species in the water. So I actually have a video here that's really, really cool, if it'll play, but it might not work, of a small spotted cat shark or a dogfish that has actually been discovered in the egg case itself. So I'll just mute that down. So you'll be able to see and get a bit more of an appreciation for what these egg cases are. Basically, sharks or skates that lay eggs will lay them under the water. They will attach them to whatever is going to be able to hold those eggs in place. So a little bit of seaweed, seagrass. Sometimes we've seen kind of man-made objects have been used to attach. And from that, you'll get the embryo, or the young will develop inside these little sacs, or this little egg case, which is made out of kind of different proteins, keratin, and they'll develop. And once the little young shark, you can kind of see there, he's almost making like a beating motion, and that's them pumping all the water in through the egg case and out through the egg case, so they're still able to get oxygen. And once they've consumed that almost like egg yolk, that's their food source in their egg, they'll be fully developed size and they'll be ready to head out onto the sea floor again, which is really incredible. I'll just see if it'll let me skip on at all. Perfect. So how do you do this? How can you help us hunt for shark and skate egg cases? Well, it's really, really easy to do. You're basically just choosing a shore, absolutely any piece of coastline around Northern Ireland. Then you're going to hunt along all of the beach, but what we find is these egg cases tend to be in the strand line, which is basically that line of seaweed that's been washed up and has been left and dries out on the beach. That's kind of the best place to hunt for them. You'll then identify your finds, so you'll be able to look at them. And the great thing about egg cases is, depending on the way they look, they will be related to a particular species, or you'll be able to ID them to species level. And then once you know what you find, you can go to the Sea Deep website, and just like that, you are conserving sharks. You're a shark conservationist without even getting in the water. You submit your record and you've contributed data to the project. Now, to do this, you can go to our website. We have on there shark and skate egg case ID guides that you can work through, so that'll help you figure out exactly what you found. But we also have some shark and skate egg case hunts coming up that are live that you can join us at, especially throughout Easter. We have a few, and they will be up on our website, so you'll be able to go on to the Ulster Wildlife events page, and you can book on and come and join us as well. Or if you find any mermaids purses or any egg cases, we really want to know about them. So on our Sea Deep website, we've got our email there. You can just get in touch and send us a photo, and we'll hopefully be able to ID them for you as well. And these are some of the flapper egg cases that we found recently. So 2 of these were found on Benone Beach on the north coast, and another 2 were found in Port Ballantrae on the north coast. So really incredible, exciting finds, and I'm very jealous every time I go to the beach. I'm just constantly looking out for flapper skate egg case. So guys, that is really a very quick overview of sharks, skates, rays in Northern Ireland, and what we as Sea Deep are doing to try to learn a little bit more about them and how you can help. So I just want to say a really massive thank you for coming along and listening to me this evening, and for being so patient when some of the PowerPoint wasn't working quite as smoothly as the start. I really appreciate it. For any more information on our website, on what we do, on those events, the website's up there, www.cdeepni.org. But we're on Instagram and Twitter, so you can follow us there. And for wider living seas or marine conservation work at Ulster Wildlife, we're on Facebook as well, so you can check us out there. And just before I take any questions, just a quick reminder that we have some more winter online talks coming up, and the next one in the series is going to be hosted by Katie Bell, who's the Senior Conservation Officer at Ulster Wildlife, and it's Northern Ireland's first hedgehog survey, the results. So that'll be really, really exciting. That's on the 23rd of March, 7 p.m. And if you go to our events, you should be able to still book on to that if you're interested. And a few final things. If you do love wildlife and you've loved what you've heard this evening and you want to get involved a little bit further, you can become a member of Ulster Wildlife. You just go to ulsterwildlife.org/join, and I think it's about the same price as a cup of coffee for a month, and you'll get loads of other benefits. There's loads of insight into events. The Irish Hare, Ulster Wildlife's magazine, will come out biannually as well. If you're a member, you're able to receive that. If you're interested in volunteering at all, you can check out our website too. We'll have any opportunities up there. And again, you can follow Sea Deep on social media, but you can also follow the wider Ulster Wildlife page on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you are a member already, thank you so much for your contributions, but you can join the exclusive Ulster Wildlife's member group as well on Facebook too. So loads that can be done. So I am just going to stop my share here. And we've got about 10 minutes left. So if anybody has any questions at all in particular, feel free to ask. I'll maybe look through the chat here and see if there's anything jumping out at all. And we've got our taupe, a shark species, is one that I've just seen. Yes, taupe are a shark species as well. I didn't mention them in the chat. They are a species that we do get in our waters, but we just don't have as much data on them as we would like. We believe that Carlingford Loch might be a taupe nursery ground, but it hasn't been confirmed. And I was out recently with some of the anglers on the north coast during September time, and we came across a taupe then as well. So they are shark species and they are in our waters, and we'd love to know a little bit more about them. We've also got, is there an indication that climate change will bring other sharks to our waters? I think this is something that's still early days. We're still learning a lot more about how climate change is going to impact local shark and skate species, and what species we might lose, and what species we might start to get in our waters. We do know that with our waters warming, a lot of our fish stocks are going to be maybe migrating northwards to cooler waters. And if they migrate, a lot of our local sharks, that's what they prey on. So they may also have to move with them to find food. And then likewise, we could have some new fish stocks moving north along our waters. And with that, we might get some new species of sharks. But again, it is early days. And there is a species in the south called the ungulate ray. It prefers slightly warmer waters, and you'll find it maybe off the coast of Dorset or off Cork. And we're kind of using it as an indicator species because we have had a few records of it further up the east coast of Ireland, just outside Dublin direction. So that means that we're able to kind of monitor that species movement, and that might give us an indication that our waters are warming a little bit more, but still a lot to learn about them. Where do they lay their eggs? Someone's asked. So they, in a few different places. Some shark species will lay their eggs. They basically, when they lay them, have these like curly tendrils. So if you've ever come across a mermaid's purse, you'll maybe see these really tightly wound curly tendrils. And shark species will almost kind of wind round seaweed or seagrass or anything that they want to attach it to. And that will just keep it attached in place. Some skate species, when they lay eggs, they're covered in this like gelatinous mucus almost, and that will attract little shells, little debris, rocks, pebbles, and that will weigh the species or the egg case down on the seabed and keep it in place. So both kind of elevated or attached to other things under the sea or on the seabed is where they will lay their eggs. Are skates and rays carnivorous? Yeah, so they will eat kind of a wider range of prey. Crabs, some of them will have more crushing plates, so they'll be able to kind of crack crab shells, they'll eat crab meat, but some of them are just, you know, they will really prey on what they can find, other fish species, anything that's scuttling along that seabed is what they'll go after, but definitely carnivorous, yeah. Last Eventbrite has sunfish encounter on my bucket list. Yeah, me too. That would be amazing to see a sunfish. No luck so far, and also a basking shark is on my bucket list. I'm just going to head to the north coast this summer any clear day and just stare out to sea and hope for the best. And then just a really nice conversation going on about what some people have found. Our egg cases usually clear underwater. Yeah, so you might have been able to see from that video, they were much clearer, but what we tend to find is once they're washed up on the shore and they become a little bit more dehydrated, they'll darken in colour. So when you come across an egg case, especially the cat shark egg cases, they can be a variety of colours. Some of them can be yellow, some of them can still be really clear, and some of them will be much more brown or black in colour. So it really, really varies. And we think that's to do with how much they have, you know, dried out or how old the egg case is itself. But certainly the cat shark ones that we saw in the video are kind of clear and transparent under the water. And someone says, love the video of the embryo breathing inside. Yeah, it's a really amazing video. Do they incorporate yolk remnants in? I'm actually not too sure if they incorporate the yolk remnants into their abdomen similar to birds before hatching. I'm not too sure of that process, but I can do a little bit of digging, and I will kind of put my email in the chat here as well. So if anybody has any questions that they want me to follow up on, please let me know, but I'm not too sure about that actually. And I think, is there anything we can do to help sharks? Yeah, there's loads of things, and I know it sometimes feels like they might be a really challenging species to conserve when you can't be out at sea or actively up close to these species, but there's so much that can be done from a distance as well. One of those big things is your shark and skate egg case hunts. So please, any mermaids purses that you find along the shore, record them with us and get in touch with us, Ulster Wildlife or Sea Deep, and let us see what you found, because that helps us build a better idea of, firstly, what species we have around our waters, and secondly, if they're using our offshore waters as a nursery ground as well, and if they're using it to lay their eggs. And if that's the case, those sites are really, really important for sustaining shark populations. So we would want to work really, really hard, or really advocate to get that area protected then. So that's one of the big things. Another thing you can do is, again, check Ulster Wildlife for any volunteering opportunities, or by becoming a member. All your donations go straight towards the conservation work that way, and can be incredibly supportive and help us do the conservation work that we're doing. Let me see. Oh, amazing. Someone's saying they have a photo of about 30 egg cases found. So please send that on. That would be amazing. If you were to stand on a thornback ray, would it hurt? I would imagine so. Yeah, most definitely. Thankfully they can actually be in quite shallow waters, but they're fairly large species. So maybe we might be able to see them if you're looking, but I would imagine, yeah, that would be a little bit sore. I am just flicking through, but we've pretty much just hit 8 o'clock, so I don't want to keep anybody on too much later, but I'm going to pop my email address in the chat. So if I didn't get to answer any of your questions, you can email me directly or get in touch via the CD email or via our social medias as well, and I can hopefully get on to you that way. Kate also posted in where you can submit your egg cases, which is really, really helpful, because that's the best way to find it out. But I will post my email directly in the chat, and I will, after that, let you guys all get on with your Wednesday evenings. But yes, again, I'll thank you so much. And yeah, any other questions, please get in touch, and I'll hopefully see some of you guys out on the shore with us this Easter at some of our egg case hunts. It would be great to see you out helping conserve sharks that way. Yes, other than that, I will leave you to it, and thank you so much, and hopefully you get along to the next talk as well. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.